What's up guys, this is Desm101, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm excited to present a special episode. We're going to be having a review of Virtual On, the arcade classic from Sega, one of my personal favorites, the port on the Saturn, and that means that we get to have a look at this bad boy, the Saturn Twinstick. Now this is a peripheral that was released only in Japan, so a lot of you might not have heard of it, but it's actually intended for use with Virtual On, and it's compatible with a couple other games. So, let's go ahead and get started.
Sega's AM3 division was a video game powerhouse in the 90s, producing such arcade stormers as Jurassic Park, Star Wars Arcade, and Sega Rally Championship. They were formed in 1993 with the intention of creating hit arcade games with cutting-edge presentation. In 1995, they created a game which highlights their penchant for sleek, futuristic design, with one-on-one arena mech combat in a signature Sega style, Cyber Troopers Virtual On. Running on an updated Model 2 board, the game is a sight to behold with its fast, complex gameplay and unique presentation with a colorful roster of mechs to choose from. The arcade cabinets focused on two-player combat and utilize a twin arcade stick to control the action. Basic movement is handled by pointing both sticks in a direction or opposite up and down to turn. A big draw of the game is the mech designs, referred to as virtualoids. Truly beautifully designed robots from Hajime Kitoki, with a nice added detail being the Sega Saturn powering each one embedded into its back. You see behind your mech in a third-person view. The control sticks each have a trigger and a thumb button. The triggers are for weapons and buttons are for dash. Each mech has 3 attacks which can run out and must be recharged once run out. This is shown in the HUD at all times. Left and right-handed weapons are fired from each trigger, while the third and strongest attack can be fired by pressing both triggers simultaneously. You can jump to quickly center your view on the enemy by moving the joysticks to the opposite left and right direction. Dashing and jumping can be combined with attacks to get a slightly different attack version, which can help how you develop a strategy in battle. Each of the 8 mechs has its own stats, the most significant of which are speed, weapon strength, and armor. I prefer to play as Viper 2 due to the high speed and strong attacks, but you may prefer something slower with a higher defense and so on. Each round only lasts a minute, so you have to quickly dispose of your foe before they overtake you. The game has a relatively deep combat system for a mech game, and you can find yourself trying to figure out strategies to get the best advantage. Each fight requires its own strategy, especially when you get to a few rounds into the game. There are 2 bosses within the game, one at the midpoint, Jaguarandi, and one final boss, Zigrad, at the end. To defeat the bosses, you have to have a good sense of how to maneuver around the arena to quickly dodge while taking your time to carefully plan attacks at the right moment. The story is rather complicated, taking place in a future where megacorporations rule. Yeah, quite a stretch, huh? A highly sophisticated technology of unknown origin is discovered along with a large lunar base, which eventually leads to the development of neural-controlled combat droids called virtualoids. The powerful corporation called DN Group has unintentionally rearmed the original security systems on the lunar base. Your first job is to complete the 5 training stages against VR test droids, then travel to the moon directly for the actual combat to destroy the rampant security system. A fun bit of trivia is that according to the later entries in the series, the original arcade machines are actually test units sent from the future to find pilot candidates, similar to the film The Last Starfighter. The first game has since been retroactively referred to as Operation Moongate, with later games in reference to it. The game did well, making a splash in the arcades, and saw enough popularity with Kitoki's Virtualoids as merchandise was seen to quickly follow in Japan. Some of these included models of the Virtualoids, original soundtrack albums, and even an audio drama series on CD that expanded the story. The same year, it was ported to the Sega Saturn with a number of slight graphical changes to accommodate the less powerful system. While it lost some of that graphical power, the game did bring new modes of play to the Saturn. To help match the feeling of the arcade game, Sega released the Saturn Twinstick, which you could buy bundled with the game. This was released only in Japan, but Sega appears to have had plans to release it here in the States due to having it included in the manual with the instructions for use and even an advertisement in there too. It likely never came out because of the decline of sales in the Saturn, and since it would have been the only North American game designed to be used with the controller, it was probably nixed. Now let's take a look at the Saturn Twinstick. The controller feels pretty sturdy, with a metal base and range of motion registered by the sticks for each direction, with a satisfying click for each of the triggers and each of the directions. The base sports a flashy top cover that matches the art style of the arcade with a nice big Sega logo in the middle, though mine appears to be slightly peeling up at the edges. When in use, it feels like there is some distance to cover to register movement quickly, but once you get the hang of it, it feels mostly responsive, if just a little clunky. Playing the game with it feels intuitive after a few rounds, and it really complements the arcade game in my opinion. I always have to play it on a surface of some kind, usually my TV tray, which I also use for my other normal arcade sticks. And having recently acquired the Saturn Twinstick, it adds great immersive dimension to the game, which brings back all those arcade memories. The game still holds up well in my opinion, and the arcade stick, while limited to only a few games, is a welcome peripheral for the Saturn that enhances the experience of the system overall. I played Virtual On for Saturn over a handful of times before I got the Saturn Twinstick, and after getting it, I have spent many more hours playing the game trying to get better with other Virtualoids and being able to complete it on higher difficulties. The Saturn Twinstick was compatible with 3 other games in the Japanese Saturn library. Griffon 2, a sequel to a Game Arts title which we did see released here, and Gundam Blue Side Story episodes 2 and 3 specifically. The controls are different for each game, although the idea is the same. Pilot a mech using the twin sticks. Today the games are a welcome set to expand on the use and fun of the Saturn Twinstick. So with that, let's quickly take a look. First up is Griffon 2 by Game Arts. The original Griffon did actually come out here, but unfortunately is not intended for use with the Saturn Twinstick, though you can still try your hand since it will accept input, as with other games. In Japan, Griffon 2 has setting options for both the Saturn Twinstick and the Mission Stick. The Mission Stick is a controller that is intended for use with flight sim and 3D games, and has the ability to offer analog control input as well as digital. The Twinstick translates fairly well to the controls of the game here in Griffon 2, with the basics of aiming and firing weapons easy to get the hang of. It works like a more modern conventional control schemes where movement is on the left stick and aiming is on the right stick. Your jump is controlled from a left thumb button press. However, once you get engaged in intense combat, it gets challenging to control the movement well because you have to cycle through forward and backward movement speeds with each click of the left control stick forward or backward. Still, the immersive element is present in the game, and thinking back to the 90s, this is a highly sought after experience from someone like myself who was very much into Robotech, Battletech, and those type of things. The final 2 games are Mobile Suit Gundam Side Story Blue Destiny episodes 2 and 3. Now that's a mouthful. Now this is from a trilogy of games on the Saturn, which is essentially the same game, with each episode containing further missions and story with minor enhancements, such as twin stick support for the second and third games in the series. The game is a fun pick up and play kind of mech sim light, which feels right at home with the twin stick. I felt drawn into the heat of the action from the internal view, with easy lock-on functions and jump ability, much like how it worked in Virtual On. There is definitely a lot of material here to play through if you like mech games, though your mileage with the Twinstick may vary depending on your preference. In many cases, players may find the transition to Twinstick to be cumbersome or jarring to get the hang of for any substantial amount of playtime. In addition to that, the game doesn't have any translations, so you're not going to really be picking up on any of the story. You'll just be playing it for the missions, unless you understand Japanese. So, here's my final thoughts. If you're a Virtual-On enthusiast, you should really get yourself a Saturn and one of these Twinsticks. But the price and use of games can make it a hard purchase to justify. If that's the case, I do still recommend checking out some of the series on your preferred console. Some of my favorites being the Dreamcast sequel, the PS2 port of this game, and the original Saturn version. Alright, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate all the support. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.